After everything that happened, I couldn't help but think about the weight I had been carrying all these years. My father, once a brilliant architect, lost everything after the 2008 crash. While he was falling, I was rising. My startup Aura AI was getting its first big break landing contracts, securing funding, everything. He couldn't see. I couldn't tell him. How could I? How do you tell a man who's just lost everything that his daughter, the one he always worried about, is suddenly a success? It would have felt like rubbing salt in the wound. So I took it all on, paying off his house, funding Ryan's law school, rebuilding that trust fund, all without anyone knowing. But in doing that, I became the Atlas child, the one who holds everything up, keeps the family together, and bears the burden. You protect everyone, but no one ever protects you. And the worst part, they don't even see the weight you're carrying. They just see you standing strong and start to resent you for it. My father was once the epitome of success. Before the crash, David Miller was known for designing iconic buildings that were celebrated worldwide. People admired him, his bold ideas, his unwavering pride in the structures he created. It wasn't just about the money or the recognition, it was about the legacy he was building. The world was his canvas, and he painted it with steel and glass. He was proud of what he had accomplished, and why wouldn't he be? His work was everywhere, his influence vast. But then came the 2008 crash, the foundation of everything he had built the company. The clients, the years of hard work crumbled in a matter of months. Suddenly, he wasn't the man with the grand vision anymore. He was just a casualty of a world that had moved on. The bank came for the house. The clients disappeared. His firm collapsed. Everything he had built, everything he had worked for, was lost in an instant. It wasn't just the money he lost, it was his identity. The man who once commanded respect and admiration became a shadow of himself. The proud architect was now the broken man fumbling through financial ruin, clinging to whatever was left of his dignity. Watching him fall, I didn't know what hurt. More seeing the man who had once been so confident and sure of himself, reduced to a shell of his former self, or knowing that I had to hide the success that I was quietly building to protect him. I couldn't let him see that his daughter was thriving while he was drowning. My company Aura AI, a small startup focused on ethical AI and safety protocols, landed its first major contract just months after his firm shut down. I secured our first round of funding, and everything seemed to be falling into place for me. While my father was staring down the barrel of foreclosure, I was in meetings with investors, negotiating deals and making moves that would eventually lead to my company being worth billions. But I couldn't tell him. How could I tell the man who had once lectured me about financial security, who had cautioned me about the dangers of taking risks, that I was doing exactly what he had feared? It would have felt like a betrayal. It would have been too much for him to bear. So I did what I thought was the only way to protect him, to protect the family. I covered up the truth. I used a series of holding companies, routed the funds through intermediaries, and secretly paid off the mortgage on the house. I made sure that his pride was preserved, that the story of his fall was erased from everyone's mind. The last thing I wanted was for anyone to know that his supposed comeback was nothing more than a fiction I had written. I funded Ryan's law school education at Georgetown, all through the family trust. So it looked like family money and not mine. And most significantly, I rebuilt the trust fund, over $21 million poured into it, over 5 years. I let my father believe that his brilliant market moves were the reason he was back on his feet. I let him lecture me about 401ks and how to manage money, pretending to listen as though his advice meant something. In reality, it was my money he was talking about, my wire transfers that were keeping the illusion alive. I did all of this because I wanted him to feel whole again. I wanted him to have his pride back. The last thing I wanted was for him to feel like a failure. But as the years went by, the loneliness started to eat away at me. No one saw what I was doing. I was carrying the weight of the family's survival, silently, holding everything up while they went about their lives, unaware of the sacrifices I was making. I became so good at it, so efficient at keeping the secret, that I forgot I had the right to set it all down, to stop carrying the weight. The whole world saw me as the stable one, the one who never faltered. But no one ever asked me how I was doing, how I was coping. No one ever offered to share the load. And eventually it became clear that they didn't even see it. They just saw me standing there steady, and they started to resent me for not struggling the way they were. It wasn't until that moment when my father found out the truth that everything came crashing down. I had lived in that quiet lie for so long, believing that keeping my family intact, preserving their pride was worth the loneliness. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't enough. The family was broken, and so was I. For years, I played a part no one knew about. I did it all in silence from behind the scenes in a way that no one could ever trace back to me. My father was broken after the crash, his pride shattered and his career dismantled. He couldn't see how far we had fallen because I was making sure he didn't have to. There was no room for failure in my family, at least not the kind that showed. His fall from grace was something I couldn't let anyone else see, especially not him. So, I did what I thought was necessary to protect him. I took out loans in my name. I used holding companies and offshore accounts to keep my identity hidden, but the money flowed like a lifeline to my father. I paid off the mortgage on the house, the one he was about to lose. Each month I made sure the payments were made, the balance stayed zero, and the house, the symbol of everything he had worked for, remained his. No one knew but me. Not even my brother Ryan, who had his own struggles to deal with. It was a strange feeling knowing I was carrying the financial weight of the family and pretending like it was just the way things were. My father couldn't afford to lose that house. It was the last thread of stability. He had left the last part of his identity that hadn't been taken from him. If it went, what would he have left? The bitterness and shame that came with that thought made it impossible for me to let go. I didn't care if it drained my own accounts. I didn't care if I was sacrificing a part of myself. I couldn't let him feel what I knew he would feel if it all came crashing down. The house was just the beginning. Then came Ryan's education. I knew what it meant for him to go to law school at Georgetown. It was his way out, his escape from the small town life we had always known. But he wasn't going to make it there on his own. I couldn't let him see the hole in our finances, so I stepped in again. I funded his tuition and his living expenses, routing the payments through a family trust, so it looked like the money had come from somewhere else. Ryan had no idea. All he knew was that he had the opportunity to become someone to rise above the circumstances we had been born into. To him, it was just what was meant to happen. He never asked questions about how the money was there or where it was coming from, and I let him keep that dream. I wanted him to believe that things were just as they should be. I wanted him to believe that the family was whole, that everything was fine, even though I knew better. But the biggest lie of all was the trust fund. That's where the real sacrifice came. I had to rebuild it from the ground up. Over 5 years, I funneled over $21 million into that trust, all while pretending to be the obedient daughter who didn't ask questions about the family finances. I couldn't risk anyone questioning the narrative. My father had to believe that his investments had made a miraculous recovery. He had to believe that he was still the financial genius he once was. I let him think that all his moves had been brilliant, even though I knew it was me, not him, pulling the strings. I even let him lecture me about the stock market, about retirement plans, about how to save for the future. I let him think that I was learning from him, that I was taking his advice seriously. But it was all based on the money I was pouring into the system. And it was so lonely. No one saw what I was doing. They never saw the long hours I spent on the phone with lawyers setting up the accounts and making sure everything was hidden. They didn't see me transferring money from one account to another, creating paper trails that were nearly impossible to follow. No one knew how hard it was for me to pretend. Pretend that everything was fine, that nothing was wrong, that I wasn't carrying this enormous weight on my shoulders. I didn't tell anyone. How could I tell them that I was shouldering the entire family, supporting their dreams while they carried on as if nothing had changed? I was alone in this. It wasn't even just about the money, it was about the emotional toll it took. I had to watch my father, who had once been so sure of himself, drift further away from the man I used to admire. I had to watch him fight me every step of the way as I secretly rebuilt everything he had lost, all while pretending that he was still the one in control, and the loneliness it was crushing. I was the one who had to keep up the charade to protect everyone, while no one ever thought to ask me how I was doing. I became an expert at hiding my feelings, at showing up to family gatherings and pretending that everything was normal, but inside, I was breaking. There were times when I would sit in my office late at night, staring at the numbers on my screen and wonder if it was all worth it. If the sacrifices I had made, the lies I had told were worth the emotional toll it was taking on me. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let my family see the truth. I couldn't let them know that I was carrying the weight of everything they had lost. And so, I kept going quietly in the background until one day it all came crashing down. The call came an hour after I sent the email. My father's voice was sharp, cracking with anger and confusion. It wasn't the shaky, vulnerable tone I had expected. It was something far worse, something more dangerous. "Phelan, what is this? What did you do?" he demanded. I didn't answer right away. I just listened as he fumbled with the phone, his voice breaking through the silence. "I got this email from your banker. These statements. This is some kind of sick joke, isn't it?" I could hear the rapid breathing on the other end, the disbelief turning into rage. "Aura Holdings $21.5 million. This is fake. This is fraudulent. What did you do?" My pulse remained steady, almost detached as I spoke calmly. "It's not a joke, Dad. It's not fake. It's the truth. It's been the truth for 5 years. The line went silent, but I could still hear him moving, the muffled sounds of his voice, the panic rising in his chest. Then my mother's frantic voice pierced through. "Phelan Miller, what is wrong with you? Your father is Peyton. He's completely undone. How could you do this to him? You've embarrassed him. You've humiliated him." Her words felt like a slap. Embarrassed. Humiliated, not once had they ever considered what it felt like to carry this secret, to hold their pride up while my own life was slowly sinking. Embarrassed him, I whispered, almost coldly. You've embarrassed him by revealing that his entire comeback story was a fiction I had written and paid for. The silence on the other end was suffocating. My mother was still yelling at me, her voice rising in pitch as she demanded that I fix what I had broken. You need to call that bank right now. You need to tell them there's been a terrible mistake. You fix this felon. You hear me? You fix what you broke. I didn't say a word. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel anger, frustration, just this strange, hollow calm. There's no mistake, I said, my voice even. Those are the real numbers. It's my money. It's always been my money. The silence fell heavier this time, a suffocating quiet that weighed down on me. I wasn't sure what hurt more, their anger or the realization that this moment, this truth, had become a direct threat. My father's wounded pride wasn't just an emotional blow anymore. It was a business liability. He could ruin everything I had worked so hard to build. His delusions, his fury, they could cost me my company, my future. I could feel the fracture deepening. You wouldn't know the first thing about truth, my father roared. You're a liar, deceitful, disrespectful, ungrateful. That word, ungrateful, cut through me. It wasn't the first time he had said it, but it carried a new weight now. Without thinking, I hung up. I didn't throw my phone. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel my heart rate climb. I just stood there breathing evenly, surrounded by the quiet hum of my office. This was no longer just a family drama. This was a crisis, a collision of my personal life and professional ambition. I had protected them for so long, but now the walls were coming down. My father's rage was no longer just an emotional burden. It was a threat to everything I had built. And in that moment, I realized I couldn't protect both my family and my company anymore. The firewall between them was gone. It was time to build the professional one. The realization hit me like a cold slap. My father's anger wasn't just a family issue, it was a business liability. The lines between my family and my company had blurred, and now I could feel the cracks deepening, threatening everything I had built. I couldn't walk that tightrope any longer. I needed a firewall, a clean, professional boundary that would protect everything I had worked for and keep my family's drama from destroying it all. The thought of severing ties with them felt like a betrayal, but the truth was, I couldn't afford to keep sacrificing my future for the sake of their pride. It was time to protect myself. I picked up the phone and dialed Sarah Jenkins, one of the top asset protection lawyers in New York. Sarah was always calm, methodical, the kind of person you call when you need someone who understands both the law and the nuances of the business world. When she picked up, her voice was warm, but there was an edge to it. She knew I wasn't calling for a simple consultation. Sarah, it's Phelan Miller, I said. My voice controlled, almost detached. I need you to draft a formal notice. I need a complete and total legal and financial separation of my personal and professional assets from my family. David and the rest of them. I want a firewall, an ironclad one, and I need it today. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for her to assess the gravity of the situation. I could hear her breathe the sound of a legal mind already processing the implications. Got it, she said. We'll get it done. I hung up feeling a strange sense of clarity, as if I had crossed an irreversible line. There was no going back now. The family I had tried to protect, the family I had carried for years, those ties were being severed. not by anger or resentment, but by necessity. I wasn't just building a legal firewall. I was building a boundary that would protect me, protect my company, and preserve what little I had left of my own life. No more pretending, no more covering for their mistakes. From that moment forward, everything was going to be separate. My business was mine, and my family, for better or worse, was on the other side of a wall they couldn't break through. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that it was time to stop being the Atlas child. It was time to stop holding the world on my shoulders and start living for myself. The phone call from Sarah shattered everything. She was calm, too calm. "Philan," she said, her voice clipped. "We have a problem, a real problem." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't ask her what it was. I already knew. My father's mess. His desperation, his need to claw back some semblance of control that had gone too far. Sarah continued. "I cross-referenced all accounts tied to the Miller Trust. Everything looked fine at first. But then I found something. 2 months ago, your father tried to make an investment, a large one, $150,000. The problem is, he didn't go through Daniel or the private bank like he was supposed to. He went to a high-interest loan company, the kind that preys on people in financial distress." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My father, my proud, once great father, had gone to the very people I had been protecting him from. But it wasn't just the loan, it was what he had done to secure it. "He used the trust as collateral," Sarah continued. "The $4.5 million you invested, he forged your signature, Phelan." My mind froze. I couldn't breathe for a moment, couldn't process what she was saying. Forged my signature. A crime. Fraud. I had trusted him. For years I had kept up the lie, rebuilding his life, covering his failures, and he had repaid me by committing a felony. He had forged my name to get his hands on money he didn't deserve. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a violation of everything I had been trying to protect. Sarah's voice cut through my thoughts, her words, colder now, more factual. "He signed your name on the co-signer and collateral documents. This is felony wire fraud and forgery Phelan, and the loan company vanished a week later. The money's gone." I stood there in silence, feeling my emotions slip away, replaced by a numbness that I hadn't expected. I should have been furious. I should have been devastated, but all I felt was a hollow emptiness. This was the man who had raised me, the man I had tried to save, and he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The money he had taken was gone, and the consequences were swift. The loan company initiated collections, contacted the bank, and started the process to seize the collateral, my trust. But what they didn't know was that Sarah had already flagged the forged signature. She had already stopped them in their tracks. The collateral was worthless. My father's crime had been uncovered, and now the banks were coming for him. They were coming for everything. His house, his car, his personal accounts. The world he had built, the one I had so desperately tried to protect for him, was falling apart. I could hear Sarah's voice in the background, but it felt distant, now muffled. My mind kept replaying the same thoughts. How had it come to this? How had my father, the man I had worked so hard to shield, sunk so low I wasn't even sure how I was supposed to feel anymore? I had spent years hiding behind a mask of protection, and now it felt like everything was slipping away. My father had crossed a line, and the moment I had feared had finally come. I had to let go. Let him face the consequences of his actions. For the first time, I realized that I couldn't keep protecting him. Not anymore. 3 days later, they showed up at my office, my parents looking like strangers. My father, once so proud and composed, was a shell of the man he used to be. Stooped gray, his suit wrinkled and unkempt. My mother was frantic, her eyes red from crying. They had no appointment. They had convinced the security team at one Vanderbilt that it was a life or death emergency. My assistant Emily buzzed me, her voice tight with panic. "Philin, your parents are here. They look very distressed." I didn't hesitate. "Send them up." I met them in the marble lobby, my gaze steady, but everything inside me was still. My mother rushed forward, her hand grabbing my arm. "Philin, you have to stop this," she pleaded. "They're taking the house, everything, your father." Her voice cracked and she broke into sobs. My father didn't move. He just stood there, his hollow eyes locked on the floor. He wasn't the man who had lectured me, the man who had once towered over me with his wisdom and pride. Now, he was just a broken figure pleading for help. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please just make them stop. Tell them you'll pay it. Please, Felon." His words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. "No," I said, my voice sharp but calm. "I won't." My mother looked at me confused and betrayed. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would you let this happen after everything we've done for you? Everything we've given you? Why would you keep all of this from us?" Her question, the one I had been waiting for, finally broke through. I took a deep breath, my gaze never leaving hers. "Because," I said slowly, "when I was 19 and won the National Coding Prize, Dad called it a cute hobby. When I got my acceptance letter to MIT, you asked me if I was sure I wanted to go so far away. And when I showed Dad my first AI model, the one that became this company, he dismissed it. My words were cold, not angry, just a steady release of all the hurt I had kept hidden for years. I learned that my success was an inconvenience to this family, so I stopped sharing it. Instead, I paid for everything. I funded your lives for 5 years, and you still think I'm just a freelance designer who needs Dad's financial advice. I looked at them not as my parents, but as tenants. You have 30 days to leave. 3 months later, I stood on the podium at the NASDAQ, the giant screen behind me, flashing our new ticker symbol, AURA. I was surrounded by my senior team, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and secrecy. The bell rang, and for a brief moment, I let myself feel it, the weight of everything finally lifting. My company Aura AI was officially public, and my stake in it was worth more than I had ever dreamed. But even more than the financial success, I felt something deeper: relief. The kind of relief that only comes when you've been carrying a burden for so long and you finally get to put it down. The loneliness, the isolation, the constant balancing act of protecting my family while building my future, all of it faded into the background as I stood there in that moment of victory. As I looked out at the crowd, I saw Ryan standing near the back. He gave me a small, supportive nod. My parents weren't there. They hadn't been at any of the major milestones, and I knew they never would be. That chapter of my life was over. When I got home that night, I pulled up the old encrypted file, the one I had kept for 5 years. The spreadsheet that tracked every mortgage payment, every tuition check, every medical bill, everything I had secretly paid for. Over $25 million worth of sacrifices hidden behind the curtain. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to keep it. I highlighted every cell and I hit delete. Gone. That record, that constant reminder of my secret life as the Atlas child, was no longer part of me. I was free, free from the weight of expectations, free from the lies, and free from the family that had never seen me for who I really was. I closed my laptop, a small smile playing at the corners of my lips. For the first time in my life, I could finally breathe. I had done it, and I was no longer carrying the world on my shoulders.